Richmond, Virginia, 1996. A city steeped in history, its cobblestone streets whispering tales of the past, its grand Victorian homes standing testament to bygone eras. The air, particularly in the autumn, carried the crisp scent of falling leaves and the distant murmur of the James River, a constant, ancient presence. It was a city of quiet traditions, academic pursuits, and a strong sense of community, where people still knew their neighbors, and a missing person was not just a statistic but a gaping hole in the fabric of daily life. For Sarah Jenkins, a dedicated English teacher at Huguenot High, life moved with a comforting rhythm, a predictable cadence of lesson plans meticulously crafted, stacks of student papers awaiting her insightful red pen, and the occasional evening spent lost in the sprawling narratives of literary classics, her mind alive with the interplay of words and ideas. Sarah was, by all accounts, a creature of habit and quiet intellect. 38 years old, with intelligent, kind eyes that often crinkled at the corners when she smiled, she lived in a modest, yet impeccably kept bungalow in the leafy, historic near West End. Her mornings began precisely at 6:30 a.m. with a cup of Earl Grey tea, brewed strong and black, followed by a brisk, invigorating walk around the block, a ritual she believed sharpened her mind for the day's intellectual challenges of dissecting Shakespeare or analyzing modern poetry. She drove a sensible, slightly dated forest green Honda Civic, a practical car that had served her faithfully for years, its passenger seat perpetually stacked with student essays, often marked with encouraging notes and thoughtful critiques. Her colleagues admired her unwavering dedication to her craft, her students respected her firm but fair demeanor, her ability to make even the most reluctant reader find joy in a well-turned phrase. Her small circle of friends, a close-knit group formed over years of shared interests and quiet evenings, cherished her dry wit, her astute observations, and her unwavering loyalty. She was an anchor in their lives, a steadfast presence. Her weekends often involved volunteering at a local library, visiting the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, or simply tending to her small, vibrant garden, her hands finding solace in the soil. There were no dark secrets lurking beneath the surface of Sarah's life, no hidden debts, no clandestine affairs, no history of erratic behavior. Sarah Jenkins was, outwardly, an open book, her life an exemplar of quiet integrity and purpose. Her younger sister, Eleanor Vance, living a few miles away in Church Hill, a neighborhood known for its historic homes and panoramic views of the city skyline, was her closest confidant. They spoke nearly every day, sometimes for only a few minutes, sometimes for an hour, sharing the minutiae of their lives, their conversations a comforting hum against the backdrop of their busy schedules. Eleanor, a bustling mother of two, often marveled at Sarah's calm, almost monastic focus on her teaching and her intellectual pursuits, a stark contrast to Eleanor's own domestic chaos. The first tremor in this meticulously ordered world came subtly, almost imperceptibly, in the waning days of summer. In early September of 1996, Sarah mentioned to Eleanor during one of their evening calls that she'd noticed a particular silver sedan, an older model, maybe a beat-up Chevy Caprice or a similar, anonymous vehicle, parked near her house a few times. Always just out of direct sight from her front window, but undeniably present. Probably just someone lost, consulting a map, or a new neighbor I haven't met, she'd mused, shrugging off the mild peculiarity. Richmond parking could be tricky. A week later, her tone was less dismissive when she confided she'd seen it again, this time not just parked, but actively following her for a few blocks on her way home from Huguenot High, its driver a shadowy figure behind tinted windows. A flicker of unease, then, ever the rationalist, she tried to dismiss it again. "It's just my imagination playing tricks, or I'm being paranoid," she'd said, though a hint of genuine worry lingered in her voice, a slight tightening around the edges of her usual calm. Eleanor, preoccupied with school preparations for her own children and the ceaseless demands of family life, offered a perfunctory, "Be careful, hun. Maybe tell the police if it happens again," thinking little of it. Richmond wasn't a crime-free utopia, but such an occurrence felt disturbingly out of place for Sarah's quiet, respectable near West End neighborhood, a place where the biggest drama was usually a barking dog or a forgotten trash can. The evening of Friday, September 27, 1996, was crisp, hinting at the approaching autumn, the air carrying the distinct scent of wood smoke from distant fireplaces. Sarah had plans to meet Eleanor for their bi-weekly dinner at the Jefferson Hotel, a local institution known for its opulent architecture, its grand lobby, and its elegant ambience. Eleanor arrived promptly at 7 p.m., secured a table in their usual quiet corner of the dining room, and waited, and waited. 15 minutes bled into 30. Sarah was never late, never. Not for anything, least of all for their cherished sisterly dinners. Eleanor, a cold, hard knot forming in her stomach, tried Sarah's home phone number repeatedly from a payphone in the hotel lobby. The answering machine clicked on each time, Sarah's calm voice offering a recorded greeting, but no living response. She called Huguenot High, thinking Sarah might have been held up grading a particularly challenging set of senior essays. The night janitor answered, his voice gruff, confirming Sarah had indeed left hours ago, promptly at 4:30 p.m., her usual time. A frantic, white-knuckled drive to Sarah's bungalow revealed nothing outwardly alarming, which somehow made it worse. The forest green Honda Civic was in its usual spot in the driveway, tucked neatly under the shade of an old oak tree. The porch light was on, casting a welcoming, yet now unsettling, glow. The front door was unlocked, a detail that immediately set off blaring alarm bells for Eleanor. Sarah was fastidious, meticulous about security. Always lock your doors, even in the daytime, she'd drilled into Eleanor since childhood. Inside, the house was eerily quiet, the silence almost palpable, heavy with absence. A half-read copy of Toni Morrison's Beloved lay open on her living room armchair, a bookmark protruding precisely from page 172. A teacup, Sarah's favorite porcelain one with delicate bluebirds, sat on the coffee table, still faintly warm to Eleanor's touch, as if Sarah had just stepped away for a moment. Her purse, wallet, and keys were on the kitchen counter, neatly placed beside a grocery list for Saturday morning. Her sensible brown shoes were by the door, everything in its place, yet profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. It looked as if Sarah had simply vanished into thin air mid-sentence, mid-thought. Eleanor called the Richmond Police Department, her voice trembling, laced with an escalating, gut-wrenching panic. The initial response was measured, almost dismissive. An adult woman, no signs of forced entry, no immediate evidence of foul play. The desk sergeant, his voice tired and bureaucratic, suggested she might have simply gone out for a late-night stroll and forgotten her phone. "Give it 24 hours, ma'am, before we can file a formal missing persons report," he advised, a familiar, infuriating refrain that echoed the skepticism often faced by families of missing adults. People run off all the time, but Eleanor knew Sarah. This was not like her, not at all. Sarah wouldn't forget her keys, her wallet, her plans. Sarah didn't run off. The 24-hour mark passed like a torturous eternity. Each minute stretched, each shadow outside Eleanor's window became a potential sign. When Sarah still hadn't appeared, the RPD finally escalated the case, assigning Detective Sergeant Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a seasoned investigator, his face etched with years of witnessing humanity's darkest corners, his eyes holding a weary wisdom. He arrived at Sarah's bungalow late on Saturday, his gaze meticulous, taking in every detail Eleanor had relayed, cross-referencing it with his own observations. He noticed the open book, the slightly warm teacup, the unlocked door, the untouched purse. He interviewed neighbors, who offered vague recollections of seeing Sarah's car earlier on Friday, but nothing out of the ordinary after she returned from school. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a woman with a sharp memory for neighborhood comings and goings, distinctly remembered seeing a silver sedan parked a few houses down earlier that week, the driver simply sitting there, but couldn't recall if it was present that specific Friday night. The detail seemed to echo Sarah's own fleeting concerns, sending a prickle of unease up Thorne's spine. The initial investigation was a flurry of activity, a concentrated burst of police resources. Forensics teams combed Sarah's house meticulously, using the rudimentary tools available in 1996. They found no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no blood, no foreign fingerprints beyond Eleanor's and Sarah's own. Sarah's car was dusted for prints, yielding only her own and those of her sister. Canvassing the entire near West End neighborhood, distributing hastily printed flyers with Sarah's smiling face, placing calls to local hospitals, mortuaries, and even the seedier motels along the highway, all yielded precisely nothing. The local news channels, WTVR and WWBT, picked up the story, Sarah's kind face staring out from newspaper headlines and grainy television screens, her disappearance a stark contrast to the city's usual rhythms of local politics and high school football. Students and colleagues expressed shock and disbelief, recounting Sarah's unwavering presence in their classrooms and staff room. The consensus was unanimous. Sarah Jenkins, the anchor, the dedicated teacher, would not just walk away from her life, her responsibilities, her students, her sister. Weeks turned into months. The initial fervor surrounding Sarah's disappearance slowly faded. The volunteers who had helped search nearby parks and wooded areas returned to their lives. Tips dwindled, each one proving to be a dead end. Each phone call Eleanor received, each passing patrol car that slowed near her house, each stranger she encountered brought a fresh wave of hope, only to be crushed by the grim reality that there was still no trace. Detective Thorne, despite his relentless efforts, found himself hitting brick wall after brick wall. The silver sedan, a tantalizing but frustratingly vague lead, was never definitively identified or linked to anyone concrete. There were no credible suspects, no ransom demands, no suicide notes, no evidence of a struggle, and most chillingly, no body. The utter vacuum of information was soul-crushing. Eleanor's life became an unending vigil, a slow-burning agony. She maintained Sarah's bungalow, paying its bills, keeping it ready for her return, though each dust motet that settled on the furniture seemed to mock her dwindling hope. She attended support groups for families of the missing, finding a bleak, somber camaraderie in shared suffering. The media, which had once sensationalized the story, moved on to fresh tragedies, to new headlines, leaving Sarah's case to linger in the cold files section of the RPD, a faded photograph on a corkboard, a ghost in the system. The city of Richmond, for all its historic charm and vibrant life, began, slowly but surely, to forget the English teacher who had simply vanished. The years that followed were a testament to Eleanor's unwavering love and sheer stubbornness. She kept Sarah's memory alive, refusing to let the city forget her sister. She revisited Detective Thorne, now a lieutenant, countless times, each meeting a polite, yet increasingly painful, reiteration of the same grim facts. No new leads, no breakthroughs, just the suffocating silence of an unsolved mystery. The world changed around them with dizzying speed. Technology advanced, transforming daily life. The internet, once a niche academic tool, became ubiquitous, a conduit for information and connection. Cell phones, once clunky novelties carried by businessmen, became sleek, indispensable extensions of people's hands. But for Sarah Jenkins, time had stopped on that Friday in September 1996, frozen in a moment of incomprehensible disappearance. By 2007, 11 long, arduous years had passed since Sarah disappeared. Eleanor, now a woman weathered by grief, her face etched with the lines of prolonged sorrow, still kept the porch light on at Sarah's bungalow, its soft glow a silent beacon in the encroaching darkness, a small act of defiance against despair. The case was firmly cold, a thick, paper-thin file in the RPD archives, occasionally reviewed by new recruits seeking a challenge, only to be returned with a sigh to its dusty shelf. The original detective, Marcus Thorne, was now close to retirement, his hope for Sarah's case a flickering ember in the vast darkness of cold cases. Then the unthinkable happened, shattering the decade-long silence. It was a sweltering July morning, the air thick with Richmond's oppressive summer humidity, a heavy blanket clinging to the brick buildings. A crew from a demolition company, River City Demolition, was clearing out an abandoned, dilapidated property on the city's industrial fringe, near the historic Shockoe Bottom Railroad tracks. The building, a former manufacturing plant that specialized in textile dyes, had sat derelict for decades, a hulking skeleton of decaying brick, shattered windows, and rusting machinery, its interior a hazardous landscape of lead paint and asbestos. It was scheduled for demolition to make way for new urban development, a sign of the city's constant, relentless evolution and reinvention. One of the workers, a burly man named Ray Miller, with calloused hands and a perpetually sweat-dampened brow, was methodically prying loose a section of rotten floorboards in what appeared to be a former administrative office space on the ground floor. The stench of mildew, decay, and the acrid memory of industrial chemicals was overwhelming. As he pulled up a particularly stubborn, waterlogged board, his heavy-duty crowbar snagged on something beneath, something solid and unyielding, nestled in the dark, dusty cavity between the joists. Curiosity piqued and instinct honed by years of unexpected discoveries on demolition sites, Ray peered into the gloom. It wasn't just dirt or structural debris. There was a small, crudely constructed wooden box, covered in years of grime and thick, spiderweb-laced dust. It looked like it had been there a very long time, deliberately concealed. He called his supervisor, a no-nonsense veteran named Frank, over. Together, with a shared sense of foreboding, they carefully extracted the box. It was surprisingly heavy, about the size of a shoebox, and sealed tightly with rusted, old-fashioned nails, as if meant to protect its contents from the ravages of time and the elements. With a final collective heave, they managed to pry open its lid. Inside, nestled among layers of yellowed newspaper clippings from late 1997, acting as both padding and preservation, was a vintage JVC GRX M1200 camcorder, its plastic casing dull with age and grime, but otherwise intact. Beside it, a single VHS-C tape, its small plastic shell faded, labeled simply and eerily, for Sarah. A shiver not from the oppressive heat ran down Ray's spine. The label alone felt profoundly unsettling. They immediately called the authorities, sensing instinctively this was no ordinary discovery, no discarded relic. Lieutenant Thorne, now a man on the cusp of retirement, his hair more gray than brown, received the call. His heart gave a familiar, painful lurch, a phantom ache from cases long cold. Shockoe Bottom, former manufacturing plant, hidden box, camcorder, a tape labeled for Sarah. The details felt like fragments from a long-buried nightmare he'd tried for years to forget. He dispatched a team from the cold case unit to secure the site, ensure no evidence was contaminated, and transport the contents of the box to the RPD evidence locker with the utmost care. This, he knew, felt different. The RPD lab technicians, led by a sharp, young forensic expert named Dr. Lena Hansen, handled the camcorder and tape with extreme delicacy. The camcorder itself was corroded and likely non-functional, but the tape, remarkably, appeared to be intact, its magnetic ribbon undisturbed. With bated breath, Thorne, Eleanor, her husband Michael, and a few other seasoned detectives from the cold case unit gathered in a small, windowless screening room. The technicians carefully threaded the VHS-C tape into an old VCR unit, salvaged from the depths of the evidence storage, its mechanics groaning softly with disuse. The screen flickered to life, static giving way to a grainy, unsteady image, the colors muted, the edges soft. The footage began innocuously enough, at least at first. A hand, gloved and unmistakably male, held the camera. It panned slowly, deliberately across familiar scenes. Sarah's bungalow, the forest green Honda Civic in her driveway, a close-up, uncomfortably intimate, of the Huguenot High School bumper sticker. Then the internal shots began, the camera having seemingly entered the home without force. The living room, a mirror image of how Eleanor had found it, the half-read copy of Beloved on the armchair, the bluebird teacup on the coffee table. The camera lingered on personal items, a framed photograph of Sarah and Eleanor laughing on a beach trip years ago, a collection of antique teacups displayed on a hutch, a small, intricate hand-stitched sampler Sarah had painstakingly made, depicting a pastoral scene. Each item, once a symbol of Sarah's life, now felt violated, defiled. There was no sound on the tape, only the faint, almost imperceptible whir of the old camcorder's internal mechanisms, amplified by the VCR's playback. The silence was deafening, the lack of dialogue making the voyeuristic journey through Sarah's most private world all the more chilling. It was clear the footage was taken inside her home, hours, perhaps days, after her disappearance, by someone who had free rein, someone who was not meant to be there, observing her life with a deeply unsettling intimacy. The quality of the footage, though dated, clearly showed the meticulous nature of the videographer, his steady hand, his deliberate choices of what to focus on. Then the footage changed, abruptly and chillingly. The camera moved into Sarah's bedroom, her most personal space. It focused on her dresser, revealing more intimate items, a delicate silver locket, a small embroidered handkerchief given to her by her mother, a collection of poetry books by Emily Dickinson and Robert Frost. The camera then panned slowly, deliberately to the wall beside her bed, where she kept a small bulletin board for notes and photos. There, crudely tacked to the wall, standing out starkly against the faded wallpaper, was a single photograph. It was Sarah taken years ago, smiling brightly at a school event. But her eyes in the photo had been savagely gouged out, replaced by two crudely drawn black X's, defacing her gentle smile. And beneath the photo, scrawled in what appeared to be vibrant red lipstick, was a single, chilling, possessive word, mine. Eleanor gasped, a strangled, primal cry escaping her lips, her hands instinctively flying to cover her mouth, as if to stifle the scream building within her. Thorne felt a cold dread, deeper than any he'd experienced in decades, seep into his bones. The sheer possessiveness, the brutal violation, the deliberate defilement of Sarah's image, it spoke volumes, painting a horrifying picture of a deeply disturbed individual. This was not a random act of violence, this was deeply personal, meticulously planned, fueled by an obsessive malice. The footage continued, zooming in on the word mine, for an unnervingly long time, the red lipstick stark and defiant against the pale wallpaper, an indelible mark of depravity. The tape then abruptly cut to a different location, a jarring shift that sent another wave of terror through the room. Dark, confined, with only a sliver of weak, diffused light filtering in from an unseen source, illuminating dust motes dancing in the heavy air. The camera moved slowly, revealing rusted pipes snaking across a low ceiling, damp concrete walls weeping moisture, the floor uneven and strewn with debris. A small, makeshift bed with a thin, stained mattress lay in one corner. On a crudely constructed shelf, a few dented cans of generic food and a plastic jug of water were visible. It was a space that screamed captivity, a makeshift prison within the bowels of some forgotten structure. And then, for just a fleeting second, almost too quick to register, a shape in the far corner, obscured by dense shadow, largely unidentifiable but undeniably human. A flicker of movement, a glint of light reflecting off something metallic and silver, like a chain or a cuff, then the screen went black. The tape ended. The silence in the screening room was profound, absolute, heavy with the suffocating weight of unspeakable horrors. Eleanor was openly sobbing now, her husband Michael holding her tightly, his own face ashen. Thorne sat immobile, his mind racing, piecing together the fragments. The tape was an undeniable breakthrough, but a horrifying one, confirming their darkest fears with a brutal, visceral clarity. Sarah had not left of her own accord, she had been taken, held captive, and the chilling mind suggested a deeply disturbed, obsessive individual whose twisted fantasy had become a terrifying reality. The immediate focus of the revived investigation shifted to the "For Sarah" label. Was it a message from Sarah, a desperate cry from beyond the grave, or, more chillingly, a message for her from her captor, a perverse memento? The content of the tape strongly suggested the latter, a deranged dedication. And the location where the box was found, the abandoned manufacturing plant in Shockoe Bottom. Could that dark, confined space, glimpsed so briefly and terrifyingly on the tape, be within that very building, or somewhere nearby, a hidden chamber within the decaying industrial complex? The old textile dye plant, once a forgotten relic, now became the grim center of a renewed, intense investigation. Detectives scoured old blueprints, interviewed former employees from decades past, and meticulously searched every inch of the vast, crumbling structure, now seen through a terrifying new lens. The building's history revealed it had been mostly abandoned since the late 1980s, but a former night watchman, a reclusive, peculiar man named Arthur Hayes, had held a sporadic, informal caretaker role until his death in 2005 from natural causes. Hayes had been briefly questioned in 1996, purely out of routine, due to his proximity to Sarah's near West End home and his generally odd, withdrawn demeanor. He was known to own an older model silver Caprice, a detail Thorne remembered from a forgotten corner of his case notes. At the time, with no other leads, he'd been dismissed as a harmless eccentric, quickly falling off the radar. The profound irony of that missed opportunity now weighed heavily on Thorne's conscience. This new evidence, so meticulously preserved, yet hidden for over a decade, provided a horrifying, undeniable narrative. Arthur Hayes, the quiet, almost invisible man who had slipped through the cracks, was now the prime suspect in Sarah Jenkins's disappearance and probable murder. The tape strongly suggested he had stalked Sarah, entered her home after she vanished, and likely held her captive in some hidden chamber. The dilapidated plant, with its labyrinthine corridors, numerous hidden nooks and forgotten basements, provided countless places perfect for concealing a secret or a prisoner. The investigation into Arthur Hayes's past intensified with a desperate urgency. Old neighbors, now re-interviewed, remembered his obsessive nature, his strange, solitary habits, his deeply reclusive lifestyle, often keeping to himself in his small, cluttered home. It was discovered he had a minor police record from the early 1980s for stalking a female coworker at a different Richmond factory, though the charges were eventually dropped due to insufficient evidence and the victim's reluctance to press the matter further. He had a chilling reputation for fixating on women he perceived as unattainable or too good for him, a pattern eerily consistent with the disturbing content of the camcorder tape. Despite the overwhelming, sickening evidence linking Hayes to the camcorder, the chilling footage, and the strong implication of his direct involvement in Sarah's abduction and probable murder, Sarah Jenkins herself remained tragically missing. Search teams, armed with the new intelligence, meticulously combed the vast, crumbling plant and its immediate surrounding areas, digging, sifting through decades of industrial detritus, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. They found nothing, no body, no further clues, no definitive answers about Sarah's final fate, no final resting place. Arthur Hayes had taken his ultimate secrets to the grave, leaving behind only a terrifying, silent video testament to his dark obsession and the unspeakable cruelty he inflicted. The tape, chilling and cryptic, provided Eleanor and the police with a piece of the truth, a horrific glimpse into the ordeal Sarah had endured. It confirmed her worst fears, replacing the agonizing uncertainty with a new, equally profound and sharp grief. But it did not bring Sarah home. Her disappearance, now framed by the sinister revelation of Hayes's probable involvement, became a saga of delayed justice, of a hidden horror that lingered for over a decade before finally surfacing, only to leave behind an enduring, agonizing question, a torment that would haunt Eleanor and Lieutenant Thorne for the rest of their days. Where was Sarah? Her kind, intelligent eyes, now forever gouged out in a grainy, defiled photograph, became a poignant symbol of a life cruelly stolen, a mystery forever etched into the quiet, historic streets of Richmond, Virginia. The truth in this case was not a comfort, but a colder, sharper, more unbearable pain. The silence of the years had been broken, but the ultimate silence of Sarah Jenkins remained.